like to call this meeting to order. Carla, can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Long, Commissioner Berman,
Here.
Commissioner Savage,
Here.
Vice Chair Moffett. Here. Chair Gilardi.
Here. Item 3, land acknowledgement. The city of Cotati recognizes that we're on the ancestral lands of the coastal Miwok, who are the original caretakers of this area. We respectfully acknowledge the indigenous peoples who have been stewarding and maintaining a relationship in the land as knowledge keepers for millennia. This acknowledgement does not take the place of the authentic relationships with indigenous communities, but serve as a gesture of respect to the land we are on. Item 4, Pledge of Allegiance. Shelley, would you like to lead us? No.
I'll read the line.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair Gilardi, I would recommend changing the order of the agenda and put item A second and item B first. Our consultant for the second item is not here, so just to give her a little bit more time in case she is running late.
Okay. Any other changes? Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Oppose? Motion carries. Item 7, public comment. Is there anyone in the public who would like to address us on any non-agendized items? Seeing none. Carla, are there any online?
Thank you, Chair Gilardi. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Chair Gilardi, it looks like that'll end Zoom public comment.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to item 8B. Consideration of the resolution recommending the city approve a minor subdivision lot split on 766 East Cotati Avenue.
Can we pull up the other presentation? Thank you, Chair. Member JP Harris, I'm a senior planner with the city of Cotati. And tonight's discussion is about a minor subdivision. It's a lot split, so it's taking one parcel and dividing it into 2 parcels. The parcel in question is located at 766 East Cotati Avenue. You would know it as the Chevron gas station. And that's the front of the parcel. And then behind the parcel is basically a vacant piece of land, which is the intent is to carve off that vacant piece and have it be a separate parcel. Let me check. Next slide, please. Project location is at the corner of East Cotati Avenue and Lancaster Drive. It's that highlighted parcel there, and you can see the Chevron development in the front and then at the back, that field area. Next slide, please. The black is the outline, is the parcel and that we're talking about, and then the red highlights where the new property line would be. If you're familiar with the site, at the back of the site, there's a landscape strip. Within that landscape, there's actually a cinder block wall with a wood gate. And so that line would kind of run right along the back where that cinder block wall is. It delineates basically the gas station from the vacant land. The shape of the lot is what we call a flag lot. That large rectangular piece to the right is the flag portion. The part that would extend down to the East Cotati Avenue is what is the pole. The lot itself, we usually view in terms of width and where front setbacks and everything. You look at the flag part. The pole is simply to provide access and utilities so that you do not end up with a landlocked parcel. In Cotati, we do not allow landlocked parcels, so you always have to have access to the street. Thus, the need for that pole to reach out to the street. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, it's a lot split, so one existing parcel into two proposed parcel. This is considered a minor subdivision under the Subdivision Map Act because it involves 4 parcels or less. Within the Map Act, there's different types of maps. For minor subdivisions, you use what's called a parcel map. It's just more of a simplified process. There's less exactions that the city can take in those cases. And you don't need to file a tentative map. In this case, they have provided a tentative map, but you're not obligated to do that normally. I mentioned it's a flag lot with access from East Cotati Avenue. There's no construction proposed at this time. There was some discussion about that early on, but really the interest of the owner is just to separate out this part of the property from the gas station property. The part of the conditions of approval, though, will require one of the pumps to be relocated. This comes from, as we get into the project, just realize this comes from a requirement from the fire department that any fuel dispenser be at least 10 feet from a property line. And one of the fuel dispensers is about 7.5 feet away from the property line. So it would have to be either removed or relocated. They could move the property line, but if they did move the property line, we would lose those. There's a large stand of mature redwood trees that we don't want to lose. And so the compromise is we keep the trees, but they would have to relocate one of the pumps. And then also we're going to ask them to do whatever ADA requirements and whatever repairs are required to the curb, gutter, and sidewalks, which is typical of any kind of entitlement process. And there will be access and maintenance easements, kind of reciprocal easements. As you can tell, the gas station will still utilize that whole portion of the property and will need to circulate around the pumps and to exit on and off to East Cotati Avenue. So there will be kind of reciprocal access easement that will allow the gas station to function properly as well for people to get back to the back of the property. Next slide. This is kind of a unique property in Cotati. This is not unique overall, but sometimes you have properties that have what's called split zoning or dual zoning. And that's where you want a property that to be developed in a particular pattern. In this case, the front part of the property falls within the general commercial, not zoning district, but land use area. And it's the commercial East Cotati corridor zoning district. The back half, the vacant part of the property, actually is zoned for high density residential and currently is in the NM or neighborhood medium density. So what this would do is basically restrict commercial development at the rear of the property, the southern part of the property, and then encourage commercial development or mixed use development along East Cotati Avenue. The property next door to the east has the exact same type of zoning. And I wouldn't get hung up on exactly where those lines are. These are somewhat of an artifact of the GIS program, but they're approximately what you see on the ground today. I will say also, the access through the gas station is a little unusual. We did talk to the applicant extensively about, working with the property to the east to either acquire that property or have that person acquire that other area that they want, the vacant area, with the idea of that would be it'd be better access. It would make for a larger, better residential project. We also discussed going between, there's on that property, just to the south, you'll see that NU area. And then it's developed with some townhouses there. And we discussed going through there, getting an easement through there, but he was not able to make that happen, according to his testimony on that. So, and then the other way to access the property would actually mean to go into Roner Park, but it would also end up with a landlocked parcel, and we can't do that. So this is the project that we have. So the subdivision itself will not change any zoning, doesn't increase development capacity. What it does though is it may provide for it to be developed a little bit easier. It would be an infill type project. Anybody, and I know the owner is interested in selling the gas station. He's I think that's his motivation, and he wants to sell the gas station. And he'll be able to sell this rear part of the property off separate and perhaps get development as opposed to, a gas station buyer that would also be interested in residential development, which would be a small number, if at all. So we're hoping that it would create an opportunity for housing development through the subdivision will, in the future, create an opportunity for that. Next slide, please. So the primary planning considerations for us were the lot sizes. In this case, it's not really an issue. The two lots are going to be each around 29,000 square feet. The minimum for a commercial lot is 6,000, and minimum for the NM district is 5,000. That's an error there. The setbacks in the NM district, there's 20 feet front and rear. They actually are maintaining that. In the CE district, there has to be 20 feet if you're going to be abutting a residential area. And so kind of where they've decided to place that line maintains that 20-foot setback. So they achieve that. It has to have street access, which we've talked about. And then this is not in the staff report, but if that flag lot, if that pole lot gets developed, there will be the removal of parking. So we did a parking analysis. There's 26 parking spaces there today. 12 are required and 19 will be remaining. So parking is covered there, even if they have to remove some of that parking along the eastern side. Generally, to approve a subdivision, there's certain findings you have to make. These findings largely come out of the Subdivision Map Act. And the findings relate to, is the subdivision consistent with the general plan? In this case, it is. It doesn't change anything, doesn't conflict with our plan, maintains the zoning, maintains the land use designations. Is the site physically suitable? In this case, it has all access to all its utilities. It can be served. There's not going to be any environmental damage as a result of the subdivision. The only public health and safety issue that we noted at all was the pump location, which would require relocation. And there's no conflicts with any easements, and there'd be no impacts from sewage discharge. So we can make all the findings that we need to make to approve the subdivision. Next slide. And then under CEQA recognizes this as a minor land division, and that this type of project with the idea that there's no variances or exceptions, and you can provide it with services, and hasn't been subdivided within the last couple of years. And it's on a slope less than 20%. In that case, if you can meet all those conditions, it's exempt from CEQA review. So it's basically considered a project that will have no impact on the environment or no significant impact. And next slide. So in closing, staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution recommending that the city council find the project exempt from CEQA and approve the parcel map to divide the subject parcel into 2 parcels, subject to the conditions of approval that are included in the resolution. And with that, I'm available for any questions or comments as well. The engineer, Mike Robertson is here, who can also answer any technical questions that you might have.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions?
I have a couple questions or clarifications. So in the pump relocation, would simply shutting that pump off and having it non-operational satisfy that requirement? Okay. Okay.
Excuse me. I don't think so. That
And
isn't
it's,
what I heard.
Pretty much just the pump, no underground tanks that have to be removed. and
No,
brought
the
out.
tanks are located closer to the corner of
Mhm.
Lancaster and East Cotati. They're kind of over in
Okay.
that corner. So it's only some piping that connects to that tank.
Okay. And there'll be a mutual easement, you said, for both property owners to use the entrance and exit there on East Cotati Avenue. On the trees, if there need to be, or if anyone would want to do any improvement that would impact those trees, would that need to come to the city council to be requested at that point in time? Or is there any concern we need to have about protecting those trees at this point, or?
The trees are redwood trees, so they do not get elevated to city council decision. So if there were a development project, it would come before the planning commission though. And you would evaluate then the loss of those trees and any mitigation. I would say there's really right now, the design is to preserve those trees. And that was the whole intent of the 35-foot wide pole as opposed to the 20-foot pole, for example. So they've built in protection of the trees at this point. So I don't see a need to further do that. Of course, anything is within the discretion of the planning commission if you want to, but we don't have a project or we don't have anything right now in front of you where there's any threat to those trees.
Okay.
And
All right, thank you.
sure.
Shelley?
Yeah, did we do any soil tests to see if there's contamination from the fuel? Do we do that? I mean,
We have not done a test recently. However, there was a tank, what I call a tank yank. But there were some tanks that were removed in 88, 89. And then the property was under remediation. They did an over excavation when they removed those tanks. And then it was under remediation, which means they were basically testing the soil around there. The water board closed that activity basically, I want to say it was in 2010, I believe. So fairly recently, they've been monitoring the site and I've closed the account that there was no threat from in the ground. Now, we haven't looked at it in the last 14 years.
can we
And
do?
if there were any kind of development proposal, there would have to be a soils test. Yeah.
Okay,
My only comment is it's been kind of a shame that lot has been like sitting back there unused. It'd be a great location for an infill project for the community. So if by granting this slot split encourages a developer to do a nice infill project, I think it would be a positive add to our needed housing. Are there any additional comments from the commission?
I'll just echo Ed's comment there that, infill opportunities are always nice to see.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address this?
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Oh, nice to see you again. My name's Mike Robertson, Principal at Robertson Engineering, engineer for the project. A couple of things of background. When this was originally proposed back in 2020, they came forward with sort of a development plan for the back portion, and I got copies of those. I wasn't the engineer at that time, and quickly realized that what they were doing wasn't going to work properly because of a number of issues having to do with fire department turnaround in the back of the building, potential setback issues, parking, a number of various things. And at that time, they were actually needing to take the redwood trees out and not impact the gas station site. By way of additional background, I personally do fueling plans for hazardous materials and gas stations, et cetera. And the state has an order to get all single wall underground fuel tanks removed out of the state by the end of next year. And so needless to say, there's a lot of owners that are doing this. It is the desire, I think, to develop that back piece, and we've come up with some schematic plans. We also did a few preliminary, I'll call them site layout plans, where there might be the potential to come forward with a little bit of a residential mixed use potential, perhaps working down below with residential above with parking, but that hasn't been developed at this point to any degree. And the other thing that I just wanted to be able to tell you that if you needed to ask me of any questions, either associated with the gas station, I might be able to answer that, although I haven't done any consulting on that particular thing for the owner. But in terms of the dispenser itself, the county Coupa, which is the regulating body along with air quality, doesn't allow tanks or dispensers to be in the ground and available for more than a year once they're not operable. So there's a regulatory requirement that drives that removal from either removing it or relocating it. So I think the condition as it stands is fine, and we take no exceptions with any of the other things that are in the staff report or the resolution. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have also.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Mike. Carla, do we have anyone online who would like to speak to this topic?
Thank you, Chair Gilardi. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Chair Gilardi, it looks like that'll end public comment.
Thank you. If there is no other discussion on this, can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion that we pass a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Catani recommending City Council approval of a tentative partial map to allow a minor subdivision lot split at 766 East Catani Avenue.
May I have a second?
I second.
Carla, can we have roll call?
Commissioner Long, Commissioner Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Savage,
Aye.
Vice Chair Moffett,
Aye.
Chair Gilardi.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mike. And now we'll go on to 8A.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. So tonight we're presenting the draft a draft of the active transportation plan. We've been before you a number of times discussing various elements of it. This is now the draft document. What's in there for the first time that you're seeing probably is a fairly large, substantial project list, prioritization of those projects, and some additional programs that the city would consider. just so that you're aware, we've also, this has been released to the public, so it's a public document. It's available until March 25th. We're taking comments until March 25th, which is a Monday. We've also had a public workshop over at the Smart Station a couple weeks ago. That was pretty well attended, and I'd like that Eris was co-host of that, and her organization co-hosted that, and are thankful to them and the SCTA for doing that. It was a lot of good feedback. And it also went to the city council just a week ago. So, so we're getting feedback wherever we can. And so that's tonight, that's what we're looking for from the planning commission and anyone else in the, available in the public. Just feedback on what you're seeing in terms of projects, programs, prioritization. And again, we're also, if you just want to listen tonight and absorb it, taking comments up until the 25th. And then the plan is to come back to you probably in a month after we've revised the document, given all the feedback that we're getting. And then we will present it to you for final adoption, and we'll go both to the planning commission for a recommendation and then to the city council for final adoption. And we're looking at the April-May timeline for that. One of the things, just so that you're, just to highlight it, like I said, we're getting comments. We just today did get a petition from a number of people on the west side that are concerned about sidewalk development. And just on that note, just so that you're getting staff's perspective. First of all, this is a plan. And one of the things that we're interested in doing on there is making sure that it's the kids, especially the children, have like access to the school without having to walk down the street. So we're looking at that. How do we achieve that? There is a big concern that we're going to do kind of the curb gutter sidewalk that you see on the east side very prominently over there. And I don't think that's the intent. The intent is to do something context sensitive. So you probably won't see curb and gutter. You'll probably most likely see kind of this natural path that we use where it's appropriate. Or we may decide that there should be no sidewalks in certain areas and or some alternative, different kind of arrangement. But we do think it's important that we do have safe routes to school. And so we're kind of just wanted to add that also that I should say with that petition, there's two things going on. We have our ATP, but what people are really, excuse me, are reacting to is there actually is a public works project right now, a sidewalk gap closure project, which intends to close some of the gaps that we're identifying in the ATP. And that is what people are reacting to is the actual sidewalk closure gap project, which is a public works project, which is right now going into design. And as part of that design effort, there's going to be public meetings and reaching out to folks. And so there's, this isn't the first time people are going to have an opportunity to talk about what's most appropriate for that part of the town. There's going to be more opportunities for it, and it's going to come through that public works process. This plan just kind of, I think, acknowledges that we need some pedestrian connections over on that side. So with that long-winded introduction, I want to turn it over to Eleanor Leshner, who is worked as part of the consultant team working on the countywide ATP. Let me remind you that Cotati's ATP is just a piece of the larger countywide ATP. However, our ATP will be a standalone guidance and planning document for the city. So with that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the introduction, JP, and thanks for having me and for your interest in the presentation. So am I able to get the slides up here? Not too sure, but can we go back to the slide before just real quick? I was just going to go over the overall agenda for my presentation. I'm not able to get the screen up.
says it's on, but.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Okay, so just overall organization for the presentation, I'm going to give a little bit of an overview. Thank you, JP, for sharing a little bit of the overview so we can kind of go through that more quickly, touch a bit on outreach, and then I'm going to spend most of the presentation talking about the draft projects and our prioritization framework. So since we've presented the early draft projects to you all in the fall, we've gone through a more robust prioritization process. So we'll be going through that and then talking a bit more on proposed programs and policies. So not only the engineering infrastructure side, but also the education encouragement and other supportive programs. And I'll wrap up speaking briefly about some considerations for implementation. So on the next slide, this is an overview of our process for both the countywide ATP and how we're developing the local plans under the countywide umbrella plan, of which Cotati is one of several local plans. In earlier stages of the process, we came to this group and shared some updates from the earlier tasks. Now we are all the way in task 6 at the draft plan stage, where we released the plan for public comment in February for 30 days, a little over 30 days, and the public comment period will end March 25th, at which point we will develop the final plan based on public comments from this group and City Council, and then take that revised plan back to Planning Commission and then finally to City Council for approval. Next slide. I spoke before about how one of the major changes with this active transportation plan and updated the previous bicycle and pedestrian master plan is thinking about how to make facilities safe and comfortable for people of all ages and abilities. The idea that most people in the general population fall under this category that we call interested but concerned. They're interested in biking or walking more, but concerned about safety, feeling comfortable on the roadways. So that's a big focus. Next slide. We're also looking at incorporating industry best practices in terms of bikeway design, incorporating where Class 4 separated bikeways may be relevant for communities like Cotati, and other topics as shown on this slide. Next slide. I mentioned one of the main focuses of the plan update is a focus on all ages and abilities. Some other key elements of the plan, I would say, are regional connections. So at the countywide level, thinking about not only local connections, but regional routes between jurisdictions. And then finally, we are focused on having an implementation plan. How do we get these projects from plan to reality? Next slide. So just summary of outreach. Outreach for this process began in 2021 when staff started process to update the bicycle and pedestrian master plan as part of the countywide effort that I've been involved in. Last fall we had quite a few pop-up events, both at the farmers market and Oliver's market, and as well as an online web map where we got a lot of engagement, an online survey. JP mentioned we also hosted a workshop in collaboration with Sonoma County Bike Coalition and the CTA at the end of last month. And yeah, really happy with the turnout there and the comments we received. Next slide. These are just some background slides. I know with this group, we've seen these a few times, but just the existing bikeway network. Next slide. This may be a new map for this group. We've also last fall did a sidewalk gap assessment looking at where sidewalks exist and where gaps exist across the city. And so shown in gold are areas where there's a gap on one side of the street, and in brown where there's a gap on both sides of the street, to identify where there may be opportunities to fill in gaps where appropriate. Next slide. This is a summary of our level of traffic stress analysis, looking at where on the network users feel comfortable, more comfortable or less comfortable on the network. So you'll see the segments in orange, which is LTS4, which is the high stress segments, are on some of the main arterials like 116 Old Redwood Highway and East Cotati Avenue. Next slide. This slide shows the updated vision statement. We came to this group with the draft vision statement, and this is the current one that's in the plan. I'll give folks just a minute to read it. Okay, next slide. These are the plan goals. We have 3 goals. One is to have a connected and reliable active transportation network. Second is to have a safe and well-maintained network that aligns with Vision Zero and safety plan policies. And finally, to have a plan that is community-oriented and place-based, so projects are tailored to different contexts, both around the county and locally, as we were discussing at the start of this presentation. Next slide. So now we're moving into the draft projects, the proposed project list. So this first map shows the proposed bikeway and corridor projects. Each project has a number associated with it, and in the plan, there's a more detailed table with descriptions of each of these projects. And let's see, I'll also just share a little bit about the key. They're color coded by project type. So in the teal turquoise color are multi-use path or class 1 projects. Yellow are bike lane projects. Orange are class 3 bike routes, which we don't have any proposed class 3 bike routes, but we do have several class 3 bicycle boulevard projects, which is orange with the black outline on it. And this really goes beyond just as typical class 3, which may have a sign or a share on the ground, but has additional traffic calming elements to make the street comfortable for kids going to school, for people of all ages and abilities. So it has those additional enhancements. It's not what we typically have seen in the past as a bike route. Let's see, dark blue is separated bikeway. So that points to that newer facility type of separated bikeways where there's physical separation between the vehicle lane and the bicycle lane. And then I'll also share in the light green, we have 3 projects that have been identified as corridor studies where further study may be needed. So you'll see this under the highway interchange on Old Redwood Highway and also East Cotati Avenue. There's some, ideas for what facilities would be appropriate there, but it was determined that further study would be needed to get to the desired facility class recommendation. Next slide. This figure shows the proposed sidewalk and crossing improvements. And so one of the policies in the active transportation plan is to have a sidewalk on at least one side of the roadway where appropriate across the city. And so these are identifying mostly locations where there are no sidewalks on either side of the roadway. And then the orange circles show the location of the 6 proposed crossing improvements across the city. Next slide. Finally, this third map shows the proposed active transportation network overlaid on the existing active transportation network. So you can get a sense of what the full network would look like at build out. Next slide. So now moving into the project prioritization effort, both for Cotati and then across for the, all the countywide plan and the local plans, we have created a prioritization framework that has 7 different criteria. So we're looking at safety, disadvantaged communities, projects near transit stops, projects near schools, whether it improves a regional route, which is something CTA has determined on the more regional network. The 6th category is reducing stress in a town center or activity hub like the downtown or priority development areas as defined by MTC. And then the last criteria, which we will be incorporated with this round of feedback, is based on community support. Projects can get an extra point to kind of move to a different tier. Next slide. So for the project prioritization, we are presenting projects across 3 tiers. It's not necessarily, project number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but we've identified what are the high priority projects that are most aligned with local and regional goals to be prioritized for implementation first. And so with that, the prioritization criteria that we've selected are aligned with regional, state, and federal, grant applications and criteria for those. So we're trying to identify projects that would be well suited to go after grant funding, for example. And then we also have medium priority and lower priority projects. Next slide. This is just a high-level summary of how the various projects scored across the different tiers. And I do have some slides at the end of the PowerPoint that show all the projects by tier. If that's of interest, we can look at that in the Q&A. Next slide. Now I'm going to move into the programs and policies part of the conversation. So on the program side, in this draft, we have proposed 4 programs. One is for the city to create a more slightly more formal active transportation program with staff time dedicated to monitoring and implementing the active transportation plan, going after grant funding, et cetera. We're also proposing potentially a transportation demand management program, but have gotten some feedback so far that may be taken out in the next draft. The third is around sidewalk and crosswalk maintenance and gap closure programs. And then the final program is around bicycle parking, both looking at the code for new developments and then also identifying where bike parking is needed across Cotati and implementing that where needed. Next slide. So now I have a couple of slides that go through the policies. I know staff presented these policies to Planning Commission, I believe in December. So this is just an update of the current policies. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just kind of show quickly on the screen that there are a couple of policies related to goal 1, having a connected and reliable network. Next slide. There are about 7 that fall under goal 1, and happy to dive into any of this in the Q&A as needed. Next slide, we have a couple of policies associated with safety, having a safe and well-maintained network. Next slide. So yeah, 7 policies under that goal. And then next slide, we'll just go through this slide and the next one. There's a couple related to being community oriented and place-based as well. Okay, so moving to the next slide, my last couple slides are about implementation. So we talked already about project prioritization, how to look at which projects are most important based on those 7 criteria. On the programs and policy sides, we've also developed an implementation timeline table, tracking table that's shown on this slide. That indicates the timeline and which parties in the city would be responsible for implementing certain programs and policy actions. Next slide. I then have 2 slides that go at a very high level, an overview of funding opportunities. So this is a summary of funding available at the regional and state level. More information on that. On the next slide is a summary of federal funding sources for active transportation projects. Next, yep. And then this last, I think this is my last slide, is about monitoring. So identifying performance measures for each of the 3 goals. So we have 2 performance measures under each of the 3 goals that we've been over, looking at miles of bikeway facilities, total or built, linear feet of sidewalks, looking at collisions, number of crossing improvements installed, the number of improvements within a quarter mile of a transit stop, and the number of new or upgraded bike parking facilities are different ways that we can measure how we're doing towards these 3 goals over time. Next slide. So wrapping up in terms of schedule and next steps, tonight we're here at the Planning Commission. Last week we were at City Council doing a similar presentation. And we are receiving public comments until next Monday, March 25th. And then we will work to finalize and bring the final active transportation plan for adoption in the April-May timeframe. Thank you so much. And yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. We talk a lot about making sure that kids have access to school and safe routes. My understanding is most students at Thomas Page Academy, which is our school, either are bused to school or driven to school. Have we talked to the school itself or coordinated with Cotati Rohnert Park Unified to talk about why and whether that's because students feel unsafe walking to school, or is it because it is simply too far?
Mhm. I can say just at a high level, we have been coordinating with the Bike Coalition and Safe Routes to School to understand at a high level, like education programs in the county. And I'm curious if staff has any other comments about specifically at Thomas Page.
I have not talked to them directly, but what I know is a large number of the students actually are coming from the Rohnert Park area. And there is no basic path for them to get there from Rohnert Park because they're typically kind of over by the expressway areas where a lot of them are coming from. So that's a challenge for us for that population. However, we do still have our own Cotati residents that are going to the school. And they do use the pathway along Richardson. And those are the gaps that we're identifying, as well as Madrone, being able to move in that direction. Plus, we're going to be putting, right now the plan is a lot more development over on that west side there along Gravenstein Highway. So we're looking to the future for that to make sure that we're getting access to the school from that area as well. But yeah, no, I think right now, just given its location, a lot of them are just driven there. And that's what we're hearing, is that parents would rather do that. And the population has shifted in terms of the children that attend that Thomas Page.
Have you been in talks at all with the folks over at Thomas Page?
I'm not aware of any city staff having conversations with Thomas Page. I have reached out to them on a number of other projects, and it's tough to get kind of sustained responses in my experience.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions?
But one, I would just add, I mean, this is an engagement effort, right? So part of the reason we're here tonight is to take additional comments and input from the commission and the public to help shape the final plan. So if the direction from the commission is to make sure the leadership of the school district gets access to this plan and a chance to provide comment on it, absolutely are interested in hearing that.
I mean, I know that I've, personally found the administration at Thomas Page to be very approachable, very friendly. And I feel like any conversation that involves students walking to school in a safe and effective way, or biking to school in a safe and effective way, is incomplete if it does not include the school.
I had a couple of questions. First of all, earlier in your introduction, when you're talking about the sidewalk closure on the west side, is there a specific west side area, or is that everything on West Cotati Avenue or everything west of 101? What is like the west?
So when I was saying west side, I was referring to the area south of Highway 116 and west of Highway 101.
So west of 101. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that makes sense. Then on page 33, I'm sorry, page 21, where they have proposed bikeway and corridor projects. Up on Highway 116, kind of where the number 7 is. We had talked in a previous meeting when we were looking at Cotati Village about having some access from the new West Cotati interchange up to that flag park and then out to, is it Hillman Road? And there's nothing like that on here. So I don't know if that's still a possibility to be considered or.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And we are baking it into that project
Okay.
as well, but it should also be reflected in the plan. So it's
Okay.
a perfect comment.
Then on some of these, I'm trying to understand the projects, and maybe if I'm getting too granular, just tell me to calm down. On number 21, I looked and it's the Lincoln Avenue project. that currently isn't a through way.
Mhm.
So I guess, how are these paths being determined if there's no obvious current throughway or roadway for them?
The exact alignment hasn't been worked out there, but what we're identifying in the plan is a need for that bikeway, kind of bike boulevard. There is, I mean, it would require coordination with both the city of Rohnert Park, other developments in the area. And then there's some alternative alignments that might be feasible. And do you want to add anything to that? Because Noah's also doing that Centera Way planning.
So the idea there was just to try to expand pedestrian and bicycle access to and from the smart station. And
Mhm.
so because it's exactly as you pointed out, because of the challenges given with kind of the jurisdictional boundaries of Rohnert Park almost surrounding the Centero neighborhood, we have some kind of aspirational ideas about just providing additional connectivity. And in that location, it's not envisioned that the Lincoln Avenue roadway would extend, but a bike path or pedestrian path from where Lincoln ends, ideally through that private development, through to the Centero neighborhood.
Not being as familiar with the other plans, I guess I'm just asking myself, of these plans, how many of them are, there's an existing roadway and it's gonna go, fairly seamless, versus how many of these are gonna requiring some further negotiation or access to other properties that we currently don't have? Is this one an exception, or are there more on here that are gonna require this negotiation with landowners and everything?
So I don't know if they're more specifically shown, but like the path you were mentioning through the Katati Village site and then connecting over to Hellman is another example where we would be essentially looking to get access across private property to eventually connect out. So it's kind of a combination of both, but I would say definitely more leaning towards existing pathways and public right of way, because a lot of the efforts are also to close gaps and to connect to existing regional paths that already exist as well.
Okay, it's all questions I have.
There are a couple others though, that will include negotiation.
Would it be possible to maybe somehow denote that, we have tier 1, 2, 3 based on a priority, I guess, and then is it an existing pathway, or is this I don't know if aspirational is the word, or something to designate those as a more complex type of a.
The ones that I'm thinking of are like the ones that you initially pointed out, like going through that development, Katati Village development. And then there's another one along, if you're familiar with the Laguna Trail, there's a gap right now at 170, I think that's the address, East Katati Avenue. So as that property, which is underdeveloped now, comes in for development, we would have to negotiate with them to complete the bike trail, which would then make a complete, gapless Laguna Trail. Those are what I'm talking about. And additionally, the plan has, we're getting some negative feedback on this particular project, so it may not make it through to the final plan, but the plan has a way of cutting through kind of off of Gravenstein Way area over the Laguna into the B section of Rohnert Park. And right now, currently, there's no way to do that. You would have to, go through someone's property. So there's a couple of more like that are kind of like long-term vision. And so I think maybe if we identify which those projects are, we might be able to put a sentence or something in the project description that would, says like, this will require
I think that might
additional
be,
negotiation.
it might be beneficial because as you're trying to understand these, and like I said, if it's on an existing roadway, it kind of makes sense. But then you see some guys, well, I don't think there's a road there, but and it just helps us understand.
And then also realize that sometimes we got a vision for the future where we need to go. And when development projects come forward, we look to these plans and especially the larger ones that you're seeing on the west side, like, hey, we're requiring class 1 bike trail along adjacent to 116. That must be part of your development. And so we use these also for that same reason, so that as these larger projects come forward, they understand that we have a plan that we need to complete. But that said, those are, I think, the easier ones, you know, any one developer coming in. The one I think, like the one going through Lincoln is more of a
Mhm.
challenge.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Speaking about the big one on the west side, until it's developed, it is a death trap. So are we doing anything for the meantime? Are we planning anything for the meantime so that something can be done so that people can bicycle more safely down that corridor?
So we have a realignment of West Cotati Avenue connecting to basically taking the angled approach where it intersects with 116 and straightening it out, building a intersection there with bicycle and pedestrian crosswalks, turn lanes, median, so full controlled intersection. And then also the petition that the commissioners got is in response to a bicycle connectivity project plan for the west side, where there's 8, well, throughout Cotati, but there are probably 6 of the 8 segments, maybe 5 of the 8 segments are proposed for the west side in areas where there's no sidewalks now, or there's gaps in the sidewalk, to finish out or try to finish out some of those roadway connectivity, sidewalk connectivity projects. And that does include a safe route to school connection to the Thomas Page path where it currently stops on West School Street.
So are you saying that until the development happens on 116, that bicycles would take the west side as an option to get through that area safely? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying the way cities get infrastructure built is a combination of efforts. And it starts with documents like this, establishing where the plans would go on a conceptual basis, aspirational ideas, and then efforts to build the vision that's in this plan get prioritized through the city council budget, individual development projects that happen to come forward, occasionally a pinch point or a high priority will rise to the top because of some other external pressure, citizen input, those types of things.
So this is still years down the road. We're talking many years from now.
Before the, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
so the last bicycle and pedestrian plan that was done was 2014, 10 years. But I will say a majority of the projects, or maybe not a majority, but over half of the projects in that plan have been constructed in that 10-year timeline.
Going back to safe routes to school, I'm saying it's probably about 15 years ago that Marcia Sue, when she was on the, worked for the city, her and I went out there and we were looking at possibilities of bringing safe routes from the back of the ballpark, connecting into where Gilman Ranch is, but with so many different property owners, that was not realistic. But at the time, we had the pathway along the ballpark to, I believe it's Richardson, improved for kids to be able to use their bikes to get as one way to get to the tunnel to get to the side of town. But yeah, as Shelley was saying, these things, unfortunately, they don't happen overnight. Question on page 22, the proposed project that we approved, the Fall Haven Estates, is that what would be indicated as number 60 on this map? And would that be an approved project, basically, that the new development would be taken care of?
I'm gonna have to reference number 60. Actually, I think you just caught an error. Yeah, because the description for project number 60.
Because it's on the page 33 is the table.
60 should be, or 59's description meets 60's location.
Yeah,
Okay.
Eucalyptus Avenue from,
I think there's a numbering error. So there is there's two sides of the highway right there. So there's still a gap on both sides of the roadway there.
Right.
There's a gap in front of Flayhaven, and there's a gap that exists between Eucalyptus Drive, right where that bus station, well, that's actually not the bus station, but between Eucalyptus, there's a larger property right there that has no frontage improvements. So from Old Red down Eucalyptus to Lebec, there's no sidewalk in that particular area. You're just walking along someone's property. Likewise, from Eucalyptus going north on that side of the street, make sure I get my directions right, the east side of the street there's no sidewalk also until you get up a little ways. So there's a couple projects there that we're trying to identify. One is that gap that goes around the corner between Lebec and then the unfinished sidewalk. There is a sidewalk gap that goes between Clothier and then down to the city boundary, which would be the Flayhaven project.
Okay, so that new development won't take care of that one side?
It will take care of it.
Part of it, but
Yeah,
not-
there is a class 2 bike trail that's staying. The roadway is gonna get straightened out, turn lane going in, but the sidewalk improvements will come in as well. So, yeah, that
Okay.
addresses that, if that project comes forward.
And then
It's been approved.
if I'm reading this correctly on the map on page 22, number 57 and number 56, when you go to the listing, I think you got those numbers backwards.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
And I'm glad to see that Valparaiso is a tier 1. Because especially with the newer development, with the homes that were built on Feller a year or so ago, and then the new proposed developed down the street, there's more and more people that come in. I would like to see, though, that 56, which is Cypress, be brought to a tier 1 to make that, because there's so many people that walk that loop with dogs, with bicycles, and it's just that it seems like on that part of town, there's been new development happening, but we're missing the connection of that loop that everybody walks on. And I think and then as far as the letter that we received from Mark on the west side, I totally understand, they have a very rural area over there. To use decomposed granite for pathways instead of cement sidewalks, I think should be a priority. But I think the bigger picture, which was already brought up, is we need to work with that side of town to find a safe route for kids going back and forth, especially as populations change, new families come in. You might not have a lot of people using those paths now, but when my kids were over there a number of years ago, there was a lot of kids that were coming. And that's one of the reasons why we focused on getting that path improved so kids can get to the tunnel under the freeway to get on this side of town. So I think that should be a priority, is working with those people to try to come up with a safe route to get kids back and forth, and just at least get a plan in place that they're happy with, and that will work with connecting Thomas Page to the downtown area. And Eris, would you like to comment? You put in a
So, hi, I'm Eris Weaver. I'm the Executive Director of the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition and a very long time Kitati resident. And I've been very happy with going through this whole procedure. My staff and I have been working with the consultants and with the staff. We've taken people out on bike rides. And you got a very long letter from my staff and I kind of went going page by page with comments, which I won't repeat any of that now, but I'm happy to answer questions about any of the specific things in there. A couple of things that I want to kind of add to all of that though is one of the things, is we focus on projects in these plans, right? Because that's the way we get funding and that's the way we do the building. But that's not the way we use them. We use routes to get to destinations, to get to places where people need to go. And a route is only as safe as the least safe section of it. So I'm happy to see a lot of focus on closing gaps because especially as we're going across town or as we go into our connecting towns. I go through 4 jurisdictions on my morning bike commute to work and think you can tell when you cross lines where things stop and start. So looking at networks is a really important thing. Safe routes to school, I want to just mention that phrase gets used kind of in 2 different contexts. So one of them is the kind of engineering building infrastructure we want to create safe routes for our kids to be able to get to school. The education program, Safe Routes to School, is operated by my organization. We're not working at Thomas Page right now. We're in over 50 schools in the county, but the schools have to want to engage with us. We need a champion at the school, a teacher, a principal, an involved parent who's helps us intersect with the school. And JP was completely right about changing demographics and the popularity of interdistrict transfers means that lots of schools in the county, people are coming from all over the place. One of the things that my staff do with the schools where we work is do GIS mapping of the addresses of the students and what percentage actually live within a walkable, half mile, a mile bikeable, actually live in that range. And there's some schools we don't work with because not enough kids in there live within a range where they could actually walk or bike to school. I don't know what the stats are for there because it's been a few years since we've done an analysis for Thomas Page, so I don't have more recent figures about that. But I see that my time is about up, but as I've said, I'm always happy to answer any questions from my perspective about other stuff from the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the public who would like to address this topic? If not, do we have any online online comments?
Thank you, Chair Gilardi. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Jessica Needham, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. I apologize if this is having you guys reiterate something you've already said. I did lose connection. This ATP plan is very detailed, and I'm sure it was not easy to put together. I really appreciate all the effort that's gone into it. I have a couple of questions on a kind of microscopic level, just because something, is particularly on my street. So I just have some questions about it. It's tier 2, number 55, 56, and 61. I'm a little confused on if that means it's going to be a sidewalk on both sides of the street. Currently, there's some sidewalks on one side and then it jumps over to the other side. So I was just curious how we would find the information out about what that's going to look like specifically. And if it is only going to be one side of the street, if there's going to be kind of a crosswalk to safely get from one side to the other. And just curious to see it in my mind, what that actually looks like and how that's going to kind of play out, just because it specifically is on my street. So I don't know if that information is out there, if I could see it or kind of put it together and kind of imagine it. I think I may have missed that part, but that's just my question on it all. And great job. This is really detailed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, Carla?
Chair Gilardi, it looks like that'll end Zoom public comment.
Thank you. Do you have any additional questions from the?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna echo that question and definitely want an answer with the Cypress. And then also just looking at policy 1-4, with all public streets shall have a sidewalk connecting to the broader network. I agree with our West Cotati neighbors that not every street in Cotati needs a sidewalk. We do have some more rural neighborhoods. And I think that not every street is used as a route to school. And if you're looking at routes versus creating, and while I understand that some of these projects may be identified as tier 3, you said, you know, every single project for the most part was completed in the past. So to have it on here tells me that we are intending to complete it. And I'm worried about that language of all.
Any additional comments? Yeah, on that language, would it be possible to change it sidewalk or path where applicable?
Sure, yeah. I mean, this is essentially gathering feedback, and then the idea is the plan gets polished up based on the input received today, presented back as the final draft to the commission, and then ultimately the city council.
Any other comments?
Did they want to answer the person?
Yes. So again, for Miss, I think Needham was her last name. So there's a distinction between the plan, which identifies conceptual projects, but doesn't get into the design details. And then the implementation of the plan, which is when the design would actually take place. However, as I mentioned, for some of the projects on that neighborhood, there is a parallel project the Public Works Department is designing right now. The process for that includes 2 public meetings that will be engaging with the neighbors and gathering input to further refine the design. So we need a way to contact Ms. Needham in order to make sure she gets on that mailing list for those project discussions. So she could either come into the office or send an email to myself, nhoush@cotadicity.org, or jpharris@cotadicity.org, Senior Planner JP Harris. That way we have her contact and we can make sure she gets looped in with that, because that process is not being managed by community development.
Seeing no additional comments. Thank you for that presentation. And we will go on to 8C, presentation of the housing element annual progress report.
So thank you, Chair Gilardi. Item C, the presentation on the housing element annual progress report is going to be led by Eli Areola, planning technician for the department.
Good evening. Thank you, commission members. As stated, my name is Eli Areola, planning technician with the Community Development Department here at the city. And I'll be presenting the housing element annual progress report tonight. Next slide, please, Carla. The housing element is one of 7 required elements of the general plan. However, unlike the other 6 elements, the housing element is on an 8-year update cycle. And this is the first annual progress report, or APR, of the 6th cycle that spans from 2023 to 2031. The housing element annual progress reports have been required by the state since 1980, when the state began requiring scheduled housing element updates. The city is required to submit APRs to the Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, or OPR, by April 1st for the previous reporting year, which is the calendar year. So this APR going to HCD and OPR by April 1st will report on housing development actions between January 1st, 2023 and December 31st, 2023. The purpose of the APR has been to demonstrate a jurisdiction's progress towards meeting its regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, which is determined by our Regional Council of Governments, who for Cotati is ABAG MTC, or the Association of Bay Area Governments and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. The city's RHNA progress is summarized in Table B of the report. The APR also serves to demonstrate a jurisdiction's progress towards meeting other commitments within the housing element, specifically the adopted housing element programs, and progress made on these programs is detailed in Table D. There are some new tables included in this year's APR, and the APR format is updated regularly as new reporting requirements are adopted by the state. And these new reporting requirements are reflected in tables A2, which lists the number of units issued, entitlements, building permits, and/or certificates of occupancy. Table C summarizes any sites that were rezoned to accommodate the RHNA, and in Cotati, there were none. The status of all locally owned land designated as surplus land, which can be found in Table H. A report on any local tenant preference policy can be found in Table K. And local early action planning, or LEAP reporting, can be found in the LEAP reporting table, which the city did not utilize any LEAP grant funding in 2023. Next slide, please, Carla. All right. Cotati's 6-cycle RHNA is broken down by income category, including 60 units affordable at the very low income level, of which half of those units are required to be affordable at the extremely low income level, as required by Government Code Section 65583, subparagraph A. 34 units are required to be affordable at the low income level, 39 units affordable at the moderate income level, and 101 units at the market rate level, for a grand total of 234 units required for this 6-cycle RHNA. Next slide, please, Carla. For a brief update on housing-related legislation passed in 2023, as has been the trend for the past few years, the legislature has passed a number of bills related to housing. And in continuing with the trend in recent years, much of the legislation passed has been passed with the goal of trying to streamline housing development, the housing development process. And this includes allowing more projects to be ministerially approved and creating more CEQA exemptions for housing development projects. The legislature is also keen on removing constraints on construction. And these include construction costs, such as the cost to build parking. The legislature has further reduced parking requirements, specifically within 1/2 mile of major transit stops, which in Cotati would be the majority of the western portion of East Cotati Avenue, next to the SMART train station. And to further reduce parking requirements, the legislature has allowed more housing development projects to share parking, as well as unbundle parking from rents. And continuing with reducing constraints on construction, the legislature has required the reduction of governmental constraints on developments, including reducing review timelines, standardizing development impact fees, building code updates, and creating amnesty programs to bring specifically ADUs up to code. The state has also expanded HCD's enforcement authority over state housing laws. Next slide, please, Carla. Did you want to jump in here?
Thank you, Eli. Yeah, so just, there is a couple, I think laws worth noting. So there's a kind of a lengthy summary attached to the report, and that's kind of just this last year, 2023. But some of the density bonus changes that are identified on page 99 of the report are worth a kind of an understanding. And so currently for any development over 9 units in Cotati, 15% of those units have to be below market. So affordable housing, that we call that our inclusionary housing policy. So you have to include affordable housing homes within market rate developments at 15% of the project. That coincides with the state density bonus percentage, where if you provide 15% of your units as very low income, you get an automatic 50% density bonus above the base zone. And so what that really means is that we're likely to see a majority of our housing projects going forward as density bonus, because basically our requirements for providing some affordable housing now align with the state's allowances to give those developers bonus units. And so we've seen that with the Cotati Village project. And staff is assuming that that trend is going to continue, given kind of the combination of both our local requirements and the state mandates. The only place where we haven't seen density bonus discussed for recent development is either projects that want to use our cottage housing ordinance, which is another path to kind of increase density. And we're going to be exploring that further based on council direction, because we see that as kind of a way to kind of get Cotati-ized versions of projects instead of just these state density bonus projects. And then also kind of your standard run-of-the-mill single family projects like we saw down on Old Redwood Highway for the Flayhaven Estates, because the market for those homes, the sales prices, frankly, basically the developers see the benefit of having kind of a more traditional single family 6,000 square foot layout as outweighing the benefits of getting bonus units. So just an interesting trend that we're likely to see going forward, I think.
Okay. And continuing with the report summary, in 2023, only 3 new ADUs were issued certificates of occupancy, one of which was permitted in 2023. 6 units were entitled at 902 East Cotati Avenue, known under the project name East Cotati Cottages. There were 127 proposed units in development applications received by the city. Those proposed units include 1 ADU and 126 units proposed at the Cotati Village 2 multifamily project. And despite having only 3 units built in 2023, at this point, staff is not concerned about meeting the RHNA requirements because of the 126 units proposed in Cotati Village 2. Staff would also like to note that Cotati Village was just approved by the council on February 27th, and the Redwood Row project is currently under review. And staff would like to note that these projects are not reported on in the 2023 APR because no action was taken on these projects. They weren't issued entitlements. They were not issued building permits nor certificates of occupancy in 2023. So these development projects that are still in the pipeline and moving forward just aren't reflected in the 2023 APR. Do you want to say anything else about on this one?
I think that's it. I'm gonna get into some of the summary of the programs.
Okay.
But it is, I think, worth noting that there were only 3 new homes built in Cotati in 2023. So obviously that trend would be concerning. However, we do have a significant number of units in the pipeline. And so as of right now, staff is not concerned with that, but it is something that we need to be thoughtful about and continue, as the state has directed us to do, to push on trying to figure out ways to support development of housing. And so on that note, I just wanted to kind of summarize some of the programs. So if you look at table D, that is a list of all the housing programs that the city has adopted as a part of the housing element. And that's page 107 of the packet. And there's over 30 programs listed there. And so those are the things that essentially the city is committed to doing to support housing. And it's a range of things, but I just wanted to highlight a few of them. Column 4 there is essentially a status update on what we're doing to implement those programs. So all of these efforts come through the Department of Community Development. And Eli is one of the lead staff that helps get these things accomplished because Cotati has no staff dedicated to housing. We're not a big enough city to have any of our own housing staff. So we do what we can with the resources that are available. But I think it's worth providing a brief update as to what we've done. So program 1.3 really kind of speaks to us being a small department. We're really trying to leverage resources that are available. So some of the nonprofit agencies that provide resources to tenants, legal aid when we have kind of landlord-tenant disputes, mediation processes run through the County Community Development Commission. We really try to leverage basically available services beyond what we can provide to really expand the services that are available to residents through the department by essentially being a facilitator for information. Similarly, the programs 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, and 2.7 are some of the efforts we're going to be taking and have been taking to streamline, support, and promote housing. Some of the things that Eli talked about that the state is essentially telling us we have to do. They kind of gave us some homework we have to do and a part of getting the housing element adopted and certified by them. So there's a pretty kind of, I would say, detailed summary of what we've been doing in response to those efforts. And then programs 2.6, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and 4.6 are some of the efforts to affirmatively further fair housing, work on anti-displacement and discrimination efforts, and then also cultural sensitivity. So those are all things that we had to do or commit to doing as a part of getting the housing element certified. And again, ways that we're trying to really kind of serve beyond the capacity of just our staff by leveraging outside resources, making sure there's access to information, and really looking at new development in a way to, for example, provide local preferences. One of the things we committed to was with our local preference policy, putting tribal members in line above kind of every other average person, all things being equal, in access to affordable housing. So it's just one of the things we did in consultation with Creighton Rancheria when we were going through the housing element process and engage with them. So just one example, but I just wanted to highlight it because those are all things that we're doing in our department to meet the state's mandates through some of the legislation that was discussed and summarized in the attachments. And then the last thing, all of these efforts are just one half of the city's commitment to what we're calling a housing strategy, what we're telling the city council we're going to do for the next fiscal year. So that's the second half of 2024 and the first half of 2025 to support housing in the community. It's all of these programs, plus trying to continue to implement all the legislation that the state has pushed down on us, which often requires changes to the city rules. And so that's a summary of what I wanted to present, but definitely worth reading more detail because this is things that we're going to be reporting on every year. So all of the 31 programs that you see listed here will not change, but every year we have to talk about what we've done in the last year. And so you'll see that column column 4 get updated every year when we come back and present this to you, the city council, and ultimately submit it to the state, because that's what they're going to be looking at to see how have we continued to try to meet those programs. And with that, we'll go to the next slide.
And so it is recommended by the Community Development Department that the Planning Commission review the provided information, identify any concerns or direction for staff, and file the report for future discussion.
Thank you. Commission have any questions?
So this will be updated every year around the time.
That's exactly right. It's due April 1st every year, yeah. And I will say the format is mandated by the state. And so sorry for the clunkiness and how the information is presented. And also they continue to add new layers of requirements every year. So I'm sure it'll be a little bit different next year.
These packets have become so much more legible in the past year in general. Do you remember they used to have like the little comment thing and everything was like a little smaller than normal? So yeah, good job, just in general. Question about the rezoning to accommodate the RENA. Didn't we rezone the Cotati Village area to accommodate the RENA?
We did. So that's a great distinction to make. So there's two different categories that rezoning falls under. One is removing governmental constraints. So that's what we did in the Cotati Village effort. And you'll see staff bringing back some additional rezoning. There's no projects pending, but just some other areas where there's some inconsistencies and some challenging zoning that we're going to be bringing that forward with. That column that you're seeing is certain cities don't have enough capacity to meet their RENA in their existing zoning designations. So their property zone, medium density, low density, et cetera. The vacant land or developable land doesn't add up to the number of units that the RENA is telling them they need to build. And so they would have to proactively upzone those sites. And that's what that is specifically identifying. Cotati did not have to do that.
Yet. I don't like the state being in our business the way they are. It's difficult for me. And stating that a development should have no parking if it's close to a major transit, when transit doesn't run, is really difficult for me because people have a hard time using public transit when it's not running. So is there a way to, I want to tax myself so that public transit is free and so that it runs often so people can actually get from point A to point B? Is there a way for us to do that regionally?
You know, I'm not aware of an answer to that question just because the city doesn't provide any public transit services ourselves. So I'm not aware of a way to, I don't have a good answer for that.
Well, I mean, that's what I would like for there to actually be public transit, to not say, okay, you're not going to have any parking. And then to say, we're going to rent you a place and then we're going to rent you a parking place is crazy to me. It's like, you know, it's already hard enough to afford a place. And I am beyond low income person sitting on this commission. I cannot afford to buy a house. I cannot afford to live in in one of these Cotati Village apartments at very low income rates. That's not me. So somehow we need to figure out how to accommodate people who cannot afford to live here. And somewhere in here, I don't know if it was this one or the next one. It says something about homelessness and doing something about homelessness. I don't think in this town we've done anything about homelessness in any way, shape, or form. So this is a concern that I have, and it boggles my mind. And when you said that the Flyhaven folks wanted to do single-family dwellings, I think they would have had their tushes kicked if they'd have done anything but what they did do, because they could not do anything more. The neighbors would have had a conniption. So we are also ghettoizing people based on their income level. And this lot behind the Chevron, I know who's gonna live there. I know. I can smell it in the fumes. It's gonna be very low-income people, and they're gonna build whatever they can build. They're gonna get all those things that you're talking about, all these benefits. So who's getting the benefit? The developer is getting the benefit. I don't know how, I mean, can we take back our power in this city to make decisions about the city? I don't know. And this is what the concerns are for me. And I do want to see development, and I don't want to see development, and I do want to see access, and I absolutely want to see access on every level, and offering things to the Grayton Rancheria folks. First off, that's beautiful. And to a lot of other people who are working in kitchens and restaurants, who are in the car washes working. Where are these people living? Mostly Hispanic, mostly Latinx people. And where is the African-American community in our county? They don't exist much. So yeah, I got a lot of issues, and I can't afford to live here. So fortunately, I've been living here, and I can afford to sit here. And I'm just, I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be a voice that's a different voice. It's something to think about, and to call things very low income when they're really not is something to consider. So this whole thing just hurts my heart. And I hope that we can actually do more for people who are so low income, and work with people who are reputable, who want to come in and do good for the community. I think they're out there, and bring folks in, get people housed. They don't have to be huge houses and infill like that. So, yeah, thank you.
I think you're not the only one that feels that way.
Thank you.
And especially with, I mean, if you look that are listed in our packet, the amount of regulation coming down from the state that's telling us how, when, and why we should do things we should do. They are unfortunately forcing things into and changes that are affecting neighborhoods and can affect the quality of life in a community. They don't fit. You can't take that square peg and shove it in a round hole, but that's what the state wants us to do, unfortunately. I want to commend you for Table B, the way it's broken down. I don't know if this is something that is on our website, but I think for people that might be interested to see all the things that are going on and that we're trying to accomplish, I think would be a positive thing to do. But again, I mean, when you just look at the number of regulations that come down from the state, it's quite amazing. And I think it's going to come a day when all of a sudden they're gonna like, wow, we've kind of like overdone things. And there's gonna be hopefully some changes coming down to kind of reverse some of this stuff. I know some of these have sunsets to them, and they've been passing legislation to change and add on to those timelines. But, unfortunately, a lot of this is dictated by the powers in larger cities, and it has, I think, negative impacts on small towns. Do you have any other comments? Well, thank you for the presentation. And we'll move on to item B, the presentation of general plan annual progress report.
Thank you, Chair Gilardi. So this item is also led by Eli Areola, planning technician for the department. And I just want to identify, so the housing element progress report has been required for a number of years. The general plan progress report is a newer requirement from the state. Essentially, once the legislature realized that there was this annual report required for housing, they've looked to different ways to leverage that report and utilize it to get kind of reporting on the laws that they've been passing. And then they have the similar idea with trying to essentially hold cities accountable for the commitments we've made in the general plan. So that's essentially what this is. And Eli will lead the report, and then I'll have some wrap-up comments before we go to questions and comment from the commission.
All right. Again, another annual progress report to present. For some very general background, the general plan identifies sorry, next slide, Carla, please. The general plan identifies the city's vision for future development and provides a framework for decision-making. The current general plan was adopted in 2015, and the general plan APR provides a status update on the progress in implementing the actions within each of the elements of the general plan, excluding the housing element. This APR is also due to both the Office of Planning and Research and the State Department of Housing and Community Development by April 1st. And so, as previously stated, the general plan APR provides a status update on the implementation of each of the elements included in the general plan, except for the housing element. Each element has a set of goals that are supported by objectives. Each objective has a set of policies and actions that implement the objective. The actions for each element are compiled into an implementation plan, and staff has utilized that format for the APR because there's no mandated format for the APR for the general plan APR as there was for the housing element APR. And so to complete the general plan APR, staff gathered information from the responsible city departments for their progress made on each action during 2023. Next slide, please, Carla. Next slide, please, Carla. And so there are two primary types of actions in the implementation plan: ongoing and project-oriented. The ongoing actions include city services, maintenance, partnerships, and data collection. Project-oriented actions include capital improvements, new programs, and code or policy updates. The level of specificity and complexity of each action varies from actions that call for the city to ensure that new development will underground its utilities to actions that call out specific circulation improvements to be made throughout the city. And this APR will be submitted to council alongside the housing element APR next Tuesday. And then staff will be submitting both APRs to the state by March 27th. I'll let Director House take over.
Yeah, so just wanted to kind of highlight a few other things. It's important to note, and I'm sure that the commission realized as they started reviewing some of this, some of these tasks or goals are aspirational, kind of like the active transportation plan, while others are very, very specific. It's some of these things have to be there in order for us to get funding. If there's grants available, to force developers to do some of the construction. If there's a new road that's through an area of private development, like the extension of Gilman Ranch, that is on our general plan as a circulation feature to connect over to Madrone at some point as development occurs. Without having in this plan, then we can't require that as those projects start to come in. There's no priority set for most of these. So it's also kind of interesting to have this kind of laundry list of tasks, but no, for the most part, no specific priorities. So then that comes as city council set their goals, or the budget gets put together, or even just individual opportunities arise that we may not be aware of. So just know there's kind of a little bit of a grab bag for tasks, and it's spread across the city. So there's tasks for all the different departments, even agencies outside the department. You probably noticed some references to Caltrans or the county. Sometimes we're supposed to work together with other departments, others it's individual. And then the last thing I would just point out is this plan was done in 2015, which means some of the policies are even outdated. So it envisions Gravenstein Highway being a 4-door or 4-lane corridor all the way to the edge of the city. And I don't think anyone in this room thinks that's a good idea for traffic calming and to make it safe to cross and get into the city. But that's what was envisioned in 2015, partially because that's what Caltrans envisioned, and that's their facility technically. So when we go to update the plan, we're going to be pushing to try to get that narrowed down and keep it as slow and narrow as possible until it gets out of town, really delineating when that infrastructure and that roadway gets into the city, and that you're now in town and you need to slow down and drive more like a city street, even if it might have a highway label. So just some things to point out. And just as Eli pointed out, it's essentially trying to give a status update about where we are with things. And some of the things it even says has not started yet, or some of them are on hold, others are complete, and some of them are going to be ongoing throughout the life of the plan. So just be aware of that. And that's all I have to add. And so I think we can go to the next slide.
So once again, it is recommended by the Community Development Department that the Planning Commission review the provided information, identify any concerns or direction for staff, and file the report for future discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Since we're kind of looking at future aspiration plans, etc., what is the current status with the thought process of reuniting the plaza downtown?
So it's listed in the capital improvement program. So Public Works has to do a 5-year plan, and it's in year 5 of their current planning.
So can you explain that like I'm 5?
Yeah, sorry. So what that means is, in theory, 5 years from now, they will be trying to build that.
Do we have, was there a determination on a final design?
No. So the idea is with the 5-year plan is just like kind of with the 116 improvements at West Cotati. Right now, we're funding the design work of that. That was in last year's budget. Once we have that design done, and it'll be ahead of the next fiscal year, which starts in July, then we can start to put together money towards building it. And that's likely to come from a combination of actual city budget money, maybe a federal grant or earmark from Congress, if they ever pass a budget, county transportation money. So one of the interesting things that to realize about ABAG and MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, in addition to mandating a lot of things policy wise, that's where the money, the state and federal money flows through them to Sonoma County Transportation Authority, then out to the other cities. And so these transportation authorities are often the funding sources. And so when you have transportation projects, You tap them for kind of a local but regional source of funds. And then depending on any other kind of mix of sources, we would be trying to put together a funding stack to then actually be able to build the project. And that would probably take a couple of years to get the money together. Then it goes out to bid and then construction starts. So that's kind of the process. And that's why having it in year 5 allows you to start to put money into the design work, probably in year 2, start to get money in years 3 and 4, ultimately with the vision of getting it built in year 5. But for projects like that, it's often not unheard of for those projects to maybe slide a few years in the planning process as well.
Shelley? Oh, I got a lot to say about this too, because I read it. And food stamps was mentioned a lot. And I don't know if staff knows how much people get per month on food stamps. It's not a lot. $100 maybe a month. People who are very low income. And as anybody knows who goes to the grocery store or goes to Oliver's, oh, you can drop $100 there, easy, in one go. So food stamps is not the answer. And it's not going very far. So whether the farmer's market accepts food stamps, I don't know that that's a great big deal. And maybe it would be a big deal if we could get more money to people for food. That would be a big deal. Bottom line. And Redwood Empire Food Bank does not go to Charles Street Village anymore to give them food. They quit. It's been 4 months. Just didn't even give them notice, just said, we're not coming back next week. Yes, that's true. So I used to think that folks living at Charles Street had to blame themselves if they didn't have enough to eat. But that's not the case anymore. They used to get food from Oliver's. And since the pandemic, they don't get food from Oliver's anymore. People are too afraid to give away food. So I do think there is hunger going on in this town. And the Folletti Ranch is brought up a lot. To me, the Folletti Ranch it's a thing of beauty and it looks like a fortress. And I don't know how to get through the front door. You know, I don't know how to go in. I don't know how to get access. And here I am sitting on this commission and I don't know how to get access. Truly. I would love to be in there digging and growing and taking home food. I see that they're growing food. Where is the food going? It needs to go to us. It's ours, right? I thought. So I want to see the food. I see that we're planting a lot of trees. I see it's particular trees. I would like the trees to have food on them. Myself. I think we need food here. I mean, I really do. I should have eaten before I came. And sorry. I'm really happy that before we militarize the police, it has to come before council. That was something that just blew me away. I'm really happy to see that before they get things from the military, it has to go before council. That just glaring jumped out at me. So yeah, we've got concerns in the town. Folks are hungry, I think, and there are things that we need to work on. And having real knowledge of what people are receiving is important to me. I don't know how to make this a discussion. I mean, I just know that I get all hot under my collars and I don't mean to. I want to open it up to discussion. I want folks to know that this is just stuff that it's hard when you don't have enough. And there are folks who don't. And there are folks who are homeless living in our town. And there is nothing, although it says there's something, there is nothing for homeless folks here, except maybe to move them across to Roner Park. So I would love to see something. Love to actually see something come to fruition that is transitional housing in our town. It would be a beautiful thing. Actually, we bought things, right? Over there on Arthur Street. I think that, yeah.
There's about 6 units of
Yeah.
transitional housing.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
Any additional comments?
I think Shelley brings up some really good points. And as we're planning and developing for more affordable housing units, having resources for people. And I don't necessarily know what those resources are at this moment in time, but I think I also don't know which department at the city that would fall under, whether that would be community development, whether that would be something else. I wonder does the farmer's market have an EBT program? What are
Yes,
there?
that's a good question. So part of it is, given that we're such a small city, we don't have a lot of the kind of elements to manage some of the things that Commissioner Berman brought up. And so we lean on the county for some of those things, or our nonprofit relationships. And so the other thing is this plan was written at a certain period of time. And as you pointed out, things change, and there's been a lot of changes since 2015. And so one of the things that I've been pushing the city council on is trying to prioritize a general plan update, which is a very expensive, time-consuming process. But I think given the amount of change that's happened in the last 10 years, getting that in the budget, likely for the next budget cycle, so starting in 2025, probably be a 2-year process, is important to kind of modernize some of the things you talked about. I also think that this general plan is maybe a little bit too aspirational in what it was trying to accomplish, and maybe a little bit more focused energy and effort could allow us to actually make more progress on some of the things that were brought up.
And I wonder if a council person could be put in charge of being a liaison with the Burbank housing community, say, since that seems to be the organization that we like to work with for very low income or subsidized housing. Because folks aren't necessarily happy there, needs to be said. And I wonder if we could get some kind of a liaison that way.
I think something that's sadly happening in our county right now is a lot of these organizations are under financial stress. The closure of SAY for me was extremely sad. It's an amazing program that Ted has done phenomenal work for years. And so we've been seeing that a lot in the paper lately of a lot of these organizations that do the outreach that's badly needed are under financial strain and can't do the things that they want to do, which is really sad. Any other comments? And I see, unfortunately, we have no one in the audience to comment. Carla, is there anyone online that wants to comment on these last 2 presentations?
Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Chair Gilardi, that will end public comment.
Thank you. With no additional comments, thank you for that presentation. On to item 9, staff reports.
Just briefly, Chair Gilardi and Commission, just know the ATP comment period ends 1 week from tonight, so the 25th, as JP mentioned. Just want to highlight that. Our survey for the Plex housing visual preference survey is still out and available, and we've had a lot of uptick in people taking it since I presented or raised it up at this level and also to the city council. So I'm just going to continue to take opportunities to do that. But I think we have over 70 responses now. So thank you to everybody who took the time and for encourage friends and family and neighbors to do that. And then lastly, the city council at their last meeting approved a pilot program to paint the utility boxes. We're going to get one painted as a part of that pilot program, but I foresee additional efforts to get more of those painted. And the conceptual program envisions that maybe the planning commission would be the body to review some of the future art proposals should that get formalized. So just know that that's in the works.
Is that being modeled after any other? There seem to be several around that are successful.
I think it took influence from some of them. I wasn't directly involved in it, but I know Town of Windsor's and at least one other local community was referenced in the presentation. And if there's some communities that are more successful than others, then we would definitely love to hear that feedback, and I could pass it on to the Public Works Department as they wrap up the pilot program and look to creating a more permanent program.
So would that be like the one down La Plaza Park that's got the painting on it?
It could be, but that one was not done through a formal process.
It actually does dress them up because some of them are kind of like, they're not very nice looking. Anything else?
That's all.
Any reports from commission?
No, I just want to say there are 2 very large reports in today's packet, and I just want to recognize that that's a lot of work to do. And so thank you, all of you, for the time and effort that I know really went into these. It's well done.
And Noah, did we have any update on the February 2nd minutes?
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, so we did engage with the city clerk's office, and they confirmed the minutes are accurate as they were depicted. But I will just point out for members of the public, so if anyone speaks during a specific item, it will be noted as they spoke during a specific item. There's no kind of details on what was said or the reasoning for it. But if someone wants to take the time to point out something that maybe isn't specific to an item, I would just encourage them to take advantage of the other public speaking opportunities that are available on each agenda.
Thank you. Are there any items received after the agenda was posted?
The petition was received after the agenda was posted, and so copies were made for the commissioners to have those. The agenda will be amended to add them, and they were available for the public at the table in the back. And then just from staff perspective, we feel those comments are, while they do apply to the ATP, I think that some of the concern that's mentioned was more specific to a public works project that is under design right now.
Okay. With that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.